and today we're going to talk about tide pools. So we just had a fantastic view of outside of the Alaska Sea Life Center. This was a request from Aaron and me to watch the baby sea otters that I love to see at any point. But right now we're going to turn it over to Darin at Alaska Sea Life, and we're going to learn about what life is in a tide pool. So over to you, Darin, and thank you for the video.
You are very welcome. Happy birthday again. So, welcome to the Alaska Sea Life Center, everyone. My name is Darin, and we are going to be learning about animals that live here in the touch pool at the Alaska Sea Life Center. Ironically, it's a no-touch pool these days. We're in the process of reopening to the public, but we can't have people touching everything. So when we open tomorrow, we'll have some clear covers over this pool. So unfortunately, our visitors won't be able to handle the animals at all. But when we're open fully, this is a very popular exhibit. Today, because visitors are not here, I will be able to put my hands in there and touch some of the animals for you all to experience remotely. And we're going to be learning about these animals and how they survive along the shorelines here in Alaska. So taking a look outside today, it's a kind of a nice day. It's not really sunny, but it keeps sort of going back and forth. So tell me, what kind of things do you see? Looking out the window there, what do you see out there? I don't see any sea otters right at the moment. There's a boat. Yes, there is a huge research vessel. We can only see part of it behind our eider exhibit there. But that vessel is a little over 200 feet long. That is called the Sikuliak, and it is specifically designed for research in icy areas, so polar research. Now, it's not classified as an icebreaker, but it is able to travel through some thickness of ice to move up into the Arctic Ocean or down in the Antarctic. It's specifically designed for doing research out there in the polar regions. So there's a big boat. What else do we see? Yeah, it is huge. There's a beach, right? And water. Any animals? Mountains, trees. Yes. And the mountain is very steep right there. That's just kind of typical for this area. We have a lot of glaciers in our area. The glaciers will carve these mountains. But generally speaking, the mountains in Alaska are pretty recently formed and very tall, steep, rugged. So you can see the cliff just comes right down. There's actually a road there. And here's a smaller boat. Let's take a closer look at this one. It's moving backwards. Do not adjust your television. That is a fishing vessel. And I can't tell exactly what type of fishing they might do off of that boat. But the reason why that boat is there is if we look a little farther over behind the Sikuliak, on the other side, past the caution windows. Okay, there we go. Right there, that building in the background with the dock in front of it, that is actually a fish processor. So fishing vessels will come in from fishing and drop off their fish at the processors there. They will freeze it and ship it off to the markets. So this fishing boat here may have just dropped off its fish. Looks like it's turning around, so probably getting ready to leave. But fishing is a big part of our local community here. We have a big harbor with lots of fishing vessels, big fleet that operates out of here. Well, that was a pretty smooth turnaround. I like watching that. Nice. And several of you noticed there were birds. And so the birds are actually related to the fish. Of course, wherever there's a free meal, you will likely find some gulls around. But those birds are an example of a predator as well. So they're not just snacking on leftovers from the fish processor. They will catch and eat live prey whenever they can. And of course, there are many, many predators out there in the ocean as well, under the water. Lots of different kinds of fish, and other animals that might be trying to eat creatures that live along that shoreline. So we've got these steep, rocky shorelines. And today it's a relatively calm day. You can see the water's pretty peaceful out there. On a windy day or stormy day, there would be lots of waves crashing along the shoreline. And we don't get huge waves right here in our town because there's a series of sort of barrier islands that protect us from the big storms out there in the Gulf of Alaska. But farther out, there could be waves of 20 to 30, even 40 feet crashing along shorelines, especially in the wintertime. Here in town, our waves are not super big usually. But there's one other thing, besides predators and waves, that makes life along this shoreline challenging. And that is the tide. So as we look out here, let me pan back over to that fish processor in the background. The Sequoiac is very much in my way. But looking in the background there, you see the dock at that fish processing plant. It's about maybe 8 to 10 feet out of the water, so about 3 meters out of the water. At high tide, the highest tides, it will only be about 1 meter out of the water. And at the lowest tides, that dock will be about 5 meters out of the water. So every day, twice a day, there is a high tide and a low tide, and it's basically the water level rising and falling. Does anybody know what causes the tides? So every 6 hours, the tide is really high and then really low. 6 hours later, high again. 6 more hours later, low again. 6 more hours later. What causes that? Does anybody know? The moon. Excellent. Which is weird, right? The moon is in space, but it's orbiting around our planet. And the reason why the moon orbits around the Earth is because of gravity between the two. And as the moon is pulling on the Earth and the Earth is pulling on the moon actually pulls a bit of water toward it. And so while the moon is orbiting around us, it pulls this sort of bulge of water toward itself. And that's what causes the tide. It's not like suddenly, whoosh, there's a big wave. It is every 6 hours, the water kind of leans this way and then sort of sloshes slowly back the other way. And so that slow kind of sloshing, imagine if your bathtub were 1,000 miles long and you pushed on one end and this wave went all the way to the other end. At one end, it would just sort of slowly rise and then slowly fall. And that's what's happening with the tides. So if we look at the tides in our area, they're pretty extreme. Not the most extreme in the world, but this definitely makes it a challenging place to live. This is a beach near here called Tonsina, and you can see the beach is probably a solid mile from the edge of the kind of grasses all the way out to the edge of the water right there. So that would be about 1.5 kilometers. 6 hours later, at high tide, the beach is maybe 1 meter wide. And this happens every day. So we've got high tide, low tide. Imagine you were an animal living in the ocean right there, and 6 hours later, you are just dried up on the beach. So these tides make it very challenging for animals to live along that shoreline. And what we end up with is animals that live in certain zones based on how well they can survive in the different tidal areas. So these are called the intertidal zones. We have the high tide zone, which is only underwater a few hours a day. So animals up here, these are ocean animals, but most of their lives they will be out of the water because of the tide. So they're only underwater at high tide. This is a really challenging place to live because if you're an ocean animal, you live underwater, right? And so drying out is the major challenge here in the high tide zone. You are out of the ocean, out of your habitat for most of the day. Big deal. The middle tide zone is kind of in and out of the water all day long, but it's always right near the edge of the water. So when there are crashing waves along the shoreline, Those animals in the middle tide zone have to deal with those crashing waves all the time. So in the middle tide zone, you got to be able to deal with drying out a little bit. You're kind of half in, half out of the water. But you can handle that. It's just you got to hold on tight so you don't get washed away by those waves. So here in the middle tide zone, animals are going to need kind of a hard body to deal with the making sure they don't dry out. But they also have to have some way to hold on tight when those waves crash. If you are a soft, squishy animal, you will need to live in the low tide zone because your body doesn't want to be out of the water. But if you have a soft, squishy body, remember, all those ocean predators out there would love to eat you. So here in the low tide zone, it might seem great to just be able to be underwater all the time. But if your soft, squishy body doesn't have any kind of protection against those ocean predators, you're in trouble. So we are going to look at a set of 8 different animals today and talk about where they live in these intertidal zones. We'll put each animal into its appropriate zone as we go. The first animal we have here is this one. And who could tell me, what sort of animal is this? Oops. Nope, we're good. Cute. Anemone. Very good.
And Gabby said a low tide.
Anemone is, and it is going to live in the low tide zone. And we'll talk about why. You're absolutely right that this animal is going to need to live in the low tide zone. Someone else, let's see, May said jellyfish. Very, very close, super close relative of the anemones. They have these stinging tentacles around the outside of their body, just like jellies do. And they are made mostly of water, just like jellies. So when I wave the water at the anemone there, you can see its body just kind of moves around with it. If I touch the side of the anemone, it just waves along and shifts and bobs in the water. If I touch these stinging tentacles, you can see they're actually sticking to me. This one probably doesn't like the taste of my fingers, but they will stick a little bit. But this is how they catch their prey. Those stinging cells have little tiny hooks that catch into the prey, attach to it, and then they'll pull their prey into their mouth, which is right here in the center. If I sort of gently move these couple tentacles away, the mouth is right there in the middle, and we don't touch the anemones in their mouths because that is the inside of their body right there. I can look right into their body cavity. Their body is wide open. So here's an animal that's made of about 98% water, and it needs to stay underwater. It could be out of the water for a little bit, but it's really not going to be a pleasant experience. This animal would just sort of flop on the bottom. Imagine just like a plastic bag of water sitting on the beach. It's just going to kind of flatten, right? Someone said, Charlotte said, does that hurt? It did not hurt me to touch those stinging tentacles. The reason why is because this particular type of anemone, this is called a crimson anemone, this is not strong enough to sting through our skin on our fingers. If I put some really sensitive skin, like on my wrist where it's a lot thinner, I might feel something. And some people who have very sensitive skin might get like a little itchy sensation. But some anemones would be strong enough to cause a painful burning sensation immediately. We would not put those in the touch pool. It's bad for business. We want our customers to come back again and again and not be terrified to put their hands in the water. So we don't put dangerous animals into our touch pool. So no, it does not hurt, and that's a good thing. Here's another anemone, and this one is called a Plumas Anemone, but you can see it has pulled its tentacles inside a little bit, and that's what they do in response to anything big touching them. They kind of protect themselves. They'll also just kind of pull their food in, but you can see it's sort of closing itself off to the world. And in fact, these animals can just flatten themselves down to nothing more than just like a little sliver on the rock. Because again, they're made mostly of water. If they squeeze the water out of their body, there's almost nothing left. So this anemone that's closed up right now, later today, might look like this.
Now, Darin, Charlotte, I think Charlotte said, was it Charlotte? Yeah, Charlotte
Ooh,
and Isaiah said their
Charlotte
mom
and
got
Isaiah.
stung by a Portuguese man of war. Do you know what that is?
That is a little bit different animal. Similar in that it has the ability to sting, but a Portuguese man of war is, I believe, a type of siphonophore. It's a little bit different. It's classified differently from these jellies and anemones, the kind of standard jellyfish, and anemones that have something called nematocysts. The way that the Portuguese man of war stings is a little bit different, but very powerful, right? I'm sure your mom didn't appreciate being stung by one. And there's some really dangerous ones out there. There's several groups of these sort of gelatinous creatures. Many of them have the ability to sting, not all of them, but there are different groups. And so the Portuguese man of war is a little bit different from these anemones that we're looking at right now. But still, all of those gelatinous looking things, you should never go touching them unless someone who is an expert in those animals identifies that as a safe thing to touch, because even after they're long dead, a lot of these animals still have their stinging power. They don't have to be alive for that to work. So it's something to be very careful of. If you're ever in an area where there are these animals, unless you're with somebody who absolutely knows that it's a type that is safe to touch, you should not get close to it even, because sometimes those stinging cells can even dry out and then move around in the air a little bit, so they can be very dangerous. It's important to remember that we put safe things in our touch pool here, but there are lots of things out there that are not safe for us.
And Maddie wants to know if a box jellyfish can kill a human.
Oh, yes, it is possible. Yep, that is, I don't know how it ranks out there, but box jellies are some of the most venomous or most dangerous venomous creatures on Earth. So box jellies are extremely dangerous. The venom that they have, the toxin that they have in their stinging tentacles, is a very powerful toxin that can actually cause parts of your body to shut down. So
Whoa.
Absolutely has the potential to kill a person. And so in places like Australia, they'll put nets out to protect beaches when there are box jellies coming around. That hopefully creates a barrier so people can still enter the water safely. People wear suits to protect themselves from them. It's a serious business down there. It's something they really have to be careful of. Jellies are not things that like go and hunt people down. They're just generally drifting through the water. They pulse to move slowly, and they can control their movement a little bit, but wherever the water goes, that's where jellies end up. And so it's not that they're dangerous, that they're coming to get you, but they are dangerous in that you have to avoid them. Some of them are very hard to see in the water because their bodies are made of so much of water. Anemones, on the other hand, because they're not actively moving around very much, they're a little safer to be around. We still need to be aware of what they look like and their potential, but as long as we're paying attention, this thing is not going to drift into me. It's been there for weeks. It'll probably continue to be there for weeks. It could move, but just to give you an idea of how fast this anemone could move, for it to go from one side of our pool to the other here, this is about not even 1 meter across, that would take 3 or 4 days, I would say, for that anemone to move that far. So they're extremely slow moving creatures. And what that means is they need to live in a place where their soft, squishy body is safe. Now, they obviously have great protection from predators with those stinging cells, so they're not super concerned about predators coming and eating them. And for that reason, we can safely put our anemone in the low tide zone. There we go. So I have my little sticker. Now, another thing about these animals, because they don't move very fast, they want to find a place that brings food to them. They're not going to chase down their food. And so the anemone is often going to be found out here at the edge of the rocks where there's a lot of current kind of swirling around. Things are likely to fall into the tentacles of the anemone. They love to be in places where there's a lot of current. So that's where our anemone is going to live, out there in the low tide zone, because it has such a soft body. It needs to stay underwater and remain protected. Our next guest here today has some pretty serious protection of its own. Let's see what this next animal is. There we go. What kind of animal is that? Oh, I see. Can anemones swim? Some of them. Yes. It's pretty rare, but they sort of pull themselves off the bottom and kind of flop back and forth until the current drifts them away. So it is possible for anemones to swim, some of them. All right, now I see a couple of animals. I have sea urchin and pokey animal. You're both correct. The sea urchin is indeed a very pokey animal. Does it look safe to touch? Nope. No. You want me to touch it anyway? Oh, someone said carefully. Thank you, Charlotte and Isaiah. Maddie, yes, touch it. So I am going to touch it because, again, here in our touch pool, we do not put dangerous creatures, but watch closely as I slide my finger down inside there. As soon as the urchin's spines feel my finger, they grab it. Those spines are sort of closing like little chopsticks on my finger. Now, they don't have any way to hold on, so I can just slide my finger straight out. But this is the initial response of the urchin, is to move those spines right toward anything that's touching it. And it happens right away. So they sense that something's touching them, they move toward it. And now, if we watch really closely, there are hundreds of little skinny tubes called tube feet that are moving toward my finger. I'll put a couple other fingers in there so hopefully we can see those little tube feet. There we go. The tube feet are going to taste whatever it is that's touching the urchin, and they're going to see, is it something that the urchin would like to eat? Or is it something dangerous? Or is it just something like a rock? All of those things are interesting to the urchin because these urchins may just want to hold on to that object. They may want to try to move it around to their mouth, or they might need to protect themselves. They have these little tiny pinchers that we can't see that they're able to use to defend themselves. But those little tube feet are a key to the urchin's survival, and I want to show you what they look like from underneath. So give me just a moment here. It's going to get a little bit shaky as I move my camera around. There we go. And we're going to look at the underside of the urchin through the window here. And what you'll see is these little tiny circles all over the window. Those are the ends of the tube feet. They're very sticky. This is how the urchin holds on to things, rocks, food, everything. And right here in the center is where the urchin would eat its food. This one looks like it has a little bit of leftovers right around its mouth. Not sure exactly what that was. But if we move over to another urchin and we look really closely, you'll see 5 little sort of teeth-like structures right in the center, those little white things. Those are like teeth. They allow the urchin to consume its food. There's something right in the center of the screen. I actually have no idea what it is. See that little white thing moving around? I'm trying to watch to see if I can tell. It could be a little nudibranch or some kind of baby sea cucumber. I don't know. Fascinating. This is a reality in our touch pool here. Little tiny creatures will grow up in here and we have no idea what they are. But you can see this thing is actively moving across the window. How cute. Whatever it is. I'll have to ask the aquarists to identify that for me later on.
So we had a couple of questions about if it hurt when you put your finger in there.
Ah, that is a really great question. Because a little bit different from the anemones, there are many venomous urchins out there. We don't put the venomous ones into the touch pool again, because there are urchins out there called fire urchins that are extremely dangerous, and you would never want to touch them. But these are basically, it's sort of like putting my finger between a bunch of toothpicks. They're sharp, but I'm not stabbing my finger directly into the pointy ends. So as long as I'm careful, it's totally fine. Those spines grabbing my finger, though, it's surprisingly strong, the amount of force that they can exert. Again, all I have to do is slide my finger straight out, and they don't have a way to hold on. But it is amazing how much force they can exert with those spines. And the little tube feet, they're so small and delicate, I can't even really feel them touching me. But some species of related animals, those tube feet will stick on so well. Here's one that really likes me, apparently. We have to be really careful not to damage the animal as we pull away. So I'm going to pull away nice and far. Let that tube foot stretch. Maybe with a little gentle encouragement from my fingernail. Whoop, there it lets go. And we're all good. So no, it doesn't hurt. If you stepped on one, that would hurt. But these are not ones that are venomous. The venomous ones, as soon as you touch them, even just barely, they can give you a really powerful sting.
So
Let's
Elise,
see. Has
Elise,
anyone poked their finger? I don't know if anybody has.
oh, you can see the
Okay.
questions. Okay, got it.
Someone says, Elise and Dawson, do all of the sea urchins look the same? No. And we've got a couple of varieties here. Oh, I've got all three of them right in front of me. Great. How lucky. We have the red sea urchins. All three of these big ones on the screen right now are red sea urchins. They've got long spines. You can see this one has kind of a light color. This one has a dark color. That's just a different coloration. We also have purple sea urchins, which are a similar color, but the spines are very short. So there's a purple sea urchin. You can see the spines are much shorter than the red sea urchin. If I put my finger down there, they just got little short stubby spines. They still move, but when you see them moving, they're only about a centimeter or two long. Right to the left of that, we have a green sea urchin, also with short spines, but a very different color. So we have red sea urchins, green sea urchins, and purple sea urchins here in Alaska. There are many other varieties out there in the world, but those are the three that we have in our local area. These green ones, their spines are not very long and not as protective as the red sea urchins. So you will often find green sea urchins that look like this. That seems to be just a pile of rocks, but it is actually a green sea urchin holding on to rocks and shells all over the upper side of its body to hide from predators. It might seem weird that predators would want to eat these urchins with these spines all over them, but there are a few predators out there that are able to eat them. So camouflaging with shells and rocks like this green sea urchin is doing can be helpful. One typical predator of these urchins is Mally's favorite, the sea otter. Yes, right there, someone said, like an otter. Otters are able to eat them. There's a fish called a wolf eel that can eat sea urchins. People also eat sea urchins. And so the spines help to protect them. They've got a hard shell on the outside of their body. And those little tube feet help them to hold on really tightly. But something like a sea otter can just pull that sea urchin right off the rocks. It can use a rock to knock the spines away and then crack it open like an egg and eat the insides. So sea otters are very capable of eating them. Wolf eels have a really tough mouth, big teeth, and a crushing jaw, so they're able to eat those urchins without worrying about the spines. But there are very few animals that do eat sea urchins. Let's see. Sea otters are so cute, but you wouldn't put your finger into their mouths, for sure. There we go. And so I was wondering if anybody was going to guess this. They live in the middle tide zone because they've got a pretty hard body, but they have all those little tube feet. Those little tube feet have to have water to work. And so the urchins can only climb so high before they're just stuck when the water goes away. They'll be fine until the water comes back, but they can't get any higher than that. So the limit for those urchins, for how high they can get, is kind of the low end of the middle tide zone. You don't see them above that because they'll just be out of the water too long if they get too far up. So the middle tide zone is a decent spot for the urchins. The next animal that we're going to see has an extremely hard body and is able to survive in a place where most other animals couldn't. And we'll actually see two kind of partner animals. I'm looking for one that, oh, there we go. That's exactly what I need. Give me just a second here. Let's see if you can tell what kind of animal this is. I'm going to see if I can get my camera to focus a little bit better. Not quite. Does anybody know what kind of animal that is? I can't quite read my screen. Ooh, a sponge?
Sea snail.
Sea snail. This is actually a close relative of shrimp, believe it or not. And it was moving a second ago, but it might have spotted me and gotten nervous. I'm waiting for it to see if it'll move again. Nope. Oh, it's thinking about it. Here we go. There we go. You see those kind of feathery things reaching out. My camera is really refusing to focus. There we go.
Else says barnacle.
It is a barnacle. Very good. So this is how barnacles eat. They reach out with what are actually their legs. The barnacle is glued upside down, head first to the rock. And its legs are the only thing that will reach out of this little shell here, this exoskeleton that it has. And then you can see it's got this almost like a rock house around the outside of its body that it has built itself. If we look at most of the other barnacles in the tank, they're all sealed up tight. So when they're not eating, that's what barnacles look like. They just look like rocks. That is because barnacles are built for surviving in the high tide zone. And it's unusual because in the high tide zone, the barnacles will only be underwater for a few hours a day, of course, but that's the only place or the only time when they are able to eat. So most of the day, barnacles look like this. They're completely dried out and unable to feed. But when they are underwater, they will reach out with those little legs and catch plankton out of the water as it drifts by. So these animals are often found in the high tide zone with another common ally, the mussels. Mussels are very similar in that they really don't move from their spot. They attach themselves to the rocks with these super strong threads that they make themselves. And so although mussels can move, it's extremely slow. And barnacles are literally glued to the rock. They cannot move from their spot once they're there. So the reason why these animals live in the high tide zone is unusual. Let's take a look at what it looks like when barnacles are actively feeding. When they are underwater at high tide, you can see all the plankton drifting by. Barnacles are going crazy with their little legs, just catching all that food out of the water. But this can only happen when the water covers them. So why would they live in the high tide zone where they're only able to feed for just a little bit of the day? It's because other animals cannot survive up there in the high tide zone. And there's one particular type of animal that makes an easy meal of barnacles and mussels. But that animal cannot get all the way up to the high tide zone. So we're going to see what type of predator this is that would eat all those little barnacles and mussels and prevent them from surviving in the high tide zone. Give me a moment. I'm going to walk around with my camera. We'll take a look outside as I go, just for the heck of it. We don't have any sea otters out here right now, but there is a young sea lion. This is Kuliak, I believe. I have to see him next to his brother to really be able to tell. It's either Kuliak or Forrest. He looks pretty small. Hi, buddy. That's one of our sea lions out there. There's a couple of seals out there that are just going to spend all their time underwater, so we won't see them. Over this way, we have our eider ducks. Getting into the springtime, we've got Steller's eiders. Very cute. Chasing each other around. And in the far pool, we have some spectacled eiders. You can see them well enough. They look like they have, like they're wearing glasses. They have a little ring around their eyes. Makes them look like they have glasses on. The spectacled eiders. All right. Those are not the predators in question, though, that would eat the barnacles and mussels. Those predators live over here on the other side of our touch pool, the sea stars. Now you can see on the underside of the sea star's body, it's a lot like an urchin, all those tube feet. That's how they're going to gather their food and move around. But sea stars have an unusual way of eating their food. They actually take their stomach outside their body. I don't see anybody doing it right now. This one has an opening there where the stomach would come out, but the stomach is not actually outside right now, so maybe it just finished a meal a little while ago. But right there in the center, the mouth of the sea star actually comes outside of its body, surrounds the food and digests it. And then the stomach just disappears back into the mouth. So rather than taking the food into their mouths and ingesting it, taking it inside their body, the sea stars just crawl over the top of their food and digest it right where it sits. That works great for barnacles and mussels that cannot move. And the sea stars are obviously pretty slow moving, but with all those tube feet, just like the urchins, they can only get up so high. I'm going to look around because we've got quite a variety of sea stars here. We have some sun stars that actually like to eat other sea stars, so they're protected by a barrier from the other side of the tank. There's another type of sun star with really long rays. And you see they don't all just have 5 rays or arms. Many of them do, but some of them have 5, 12, 14, 18, up to 24 arms on the biggest ones, the sunflower stars here, these big poofy looking ones. And these are some of the biggest sea stars in the world, these sunflower stars, with up to 24 arms and up to 15,000 tube feet on the bottom of their body. They're also some of the fastest sea stars in the world. Look at them go. Yeah, they're not very excited right now. They can move pretty quickly for a sea star, but still, that's a relative term. They don't move super fast. And because all those tube feet are how they move, they can just only get up so high into the middle tide zone before they're not able to climb any higher. And that right there is the reason why you find thousands and thousands and thousands of barnacles and mussels in the high tide zone, is because if they're lucky enough to end up in the high tide zone, the sea stars can't get them. So we've got 3 animals to add to our diagram here. Let me zoom back out. The barnacle, the mussel, and the sea star. And they go in that order from highest to lowest. The barnacles can be way up into the high tide zone with their rock houses protecting them from drying out. The mussels can be shortly or just below them. And the sea stars can only get about to the top of the middle tide zone before they're unable to get up any higher. So the barnacles and mussels are safe in the high tide zone. Sure, they would love to live in a place where they could eat all day long, where they were always underwater. But if they're down here somewhere, the chances of a sea star finding them and eating them are really high. If they're attached to, let's say a barnacle attaches to a boat or a whale, the sea stars can't chase them down, right? So they're not going to get to them. But the barnacles and mussels are pretty safe up there in the high tide zone because the sea stars cannot get there to eat them. All right, we've got 3 more animals to look at. The next one, I don't have a live animal for you right here in this area, so I'm going to show you a video. We're going to start with Lulu. This is, of course, a giant Pacific octopus. And the octopus in this video, she probably weighed, 25 or 30 kilograms, I would guess, based on this size. That's a big animal. And you can see how fluidly she moves around. Their bodies are extremely soft. And here's this animal that weighs 25 or 30 kilograms. She could fit her whole body through an opening that was only about 3 centimeters wide. And that's because the biggest hard part of her body is in her mouth. It's a beak, almost like a parrot's beak, very hard structure that she uses to bite into her prey. But the rest of an octopus's body is super soft. You can see there in the center of the tank, she's sort of pretending to look like a rock. They can change the shape and texture and color of their body to match their surroundings. That helps them to hide, because the body of the octopus is so soft, if a predator like a sea lion or a big fish finds them out and about, there's a really good chance the octopus will get eaten. They do have some ink that they can use as kind of a last effort to try to prevent a predator from catching them. They send out a cloud of ink as they swim away very quickly by squirting a stream of water out of their body, swimming by jet propulsion that way. And that works pretty well, but the best thing that the octopus can do is just hide very completely, either by squishing itself into a tiny cave in the rocks or by blending in with the rocks, just camouflaging itself using its color change and shape changing ability. So hiding is a really good strategy for the octopus, but they do have a few other techniques to protect themselves, because with a body this soft, they definitely want to live down in the low tide zone, for sure. But they need some extra protection. They have some serious tricks up their sleeve. Another fun thing about octopus is how they take a bath. So this is what we call rolling. This octopus, her name was Squirt. She is going to roll her arms all over themselves and kind of scrub her body and her arms all at the same time. This is an octopus taking a bath. And then you'll see at the end, kind of like people, they often do a little stretch after they've scrubbed themselves. After they've taken their bath, they get all loosey-goosey and take a nice little stretch. she gets pretty aggressive about the rolling there for just a second. Now she wraps it up and nice. Nothing like a bath in 40-degree water. It'd be about 4 degrees Celsius for you guys. Not exactly bathtub temperature here in Alaska. So the octopus has an extremely soft body and needs to stay underwater, so it's going to live in the low tide zone, but it has tons of different ways to protect itself. And so it's just going to hide down in the rocks, typically, where it cannot be found by other predators. And it's plenty safe. Now, someone asked, do you think a sea cucumber would eat a cucumber? I don't know. Let's see what sea cucumbers do. Let me see if any of our sea cucumbers are doing anything right now. They don't appear to be moving very much. I'm looking. Yep. Pretty docile, but this one actually looks like it's pretty good. Let me get my camera set up, and then we'll see what the sea cucumber is up to. All right. So here is the front end of a sea cucumber. Its mouth is down under there. And as we watch for a few seconds, you might see some movement. It's pretty slow. Because sea cucumbers basically, this type of sea cucumber, basically just sort of crawls along and scoops up the sea floor and cleans it up. So when you look at sea cucumber poop, it looks like just little tubes of sand, basically, because they've pretty much just picked up whatever's on the bottom, filtered it through their body, and then it comes out the other end. So you can see there's these kind of sticky tentacles moving very slowly today. Down there at the bottom, they're sort of down, stuck to the rocks. They will pick up whatever is down among the rocks and move it into their mouth. So maybe if there were a piece of cucumber on the sea floor, maybe they would pick it up. There goes the movement of a tentacle there in toward the mouth. And I don't know if they're particular about what's down there or if they just eat whatever is on the rocks and clean it up.
Do they
So
live
they're
in
sort of
low
like
tide,
little-
Darin?
Well, let's see. Does it look like it's safe to touch? No, right? It's got spikes all over it, but watch this. And this will be our clue also to where it lives. I'm going to reach in and gently, because it's eating, I don't want to be too disturbing. Seems a little rude to interrupt breakfast here. There you can see the sea cucumber is moving around a little bit. If I push just a little tiny bit harder, you can see it's completely squishy. So it's a very soft-bodied animal. And indeed, they want to be in the low tide zone because their bodies are so soft, they just need to stay underwater. They're not powerful swimmers or climbers. They just want to be down on the sea floor, underwater, peacefully cleaning up the bottom. So yes, the cucumber is going to be down in the low tide zone. And although it looks like it might be dangerous, it's not dangerous at all. In fact, people eat them. And to collect them, they just simply swim down, pick them up, and put them in a bag. They're barely touched or stuck to the bottom at all. There are very few predators of sea cucumbers, but one example is one of those sea stars we saw on the other side, the one with the long, skinny orange and purple arms. That is the Stimson sun star. It likes to eat sea cucumbers. But there are very few animals that like to eat them, mainly because the food value of a sea cucumber is pretty low. There's not a whole lot in there. I have eaten them. I wouldn't say that they tasted like much, but people do eat them. But sea cucumbers are generally left alone down in the low tide zone, cleaning up the seafloor. There are other varieties of sea cucumbers that don't crawl around picking up stuff off the bottom. They actually filter plankton out of the water more like a barnacle, but still very similar. They just have the kind of sticky tentacles that they reach out with, and as things go drifting by, they collect them. All right, that leaves me with one final animal. And I've got a couple of good examples of it here.
Oh, Maddie would like to know, why do people eat things that are in tide pools? That's a good question.
Oh, that is a really good question. Remember looking outside. As soon as my camera wakes up, there we go. Couple reasons. People like to eat things that are easy to get to. So if there are fish that are right near that shoreline and we can catch them, that's great. So when the salmon come to town, the salmon will be running in August. There will be people right out there along, maybe not right there because it's a road, but right out on that beach trying to catch the salmon, because the salmon have come from way out in the ocean and they've come in close by, and we can try to catch them. That's great. When there aren't any salmon, though, if you just go down and look between the rocks, you might find things that are edible, like snails and octopus and crabs and urchins and cucumbers. Things that are easy to collect are handy for humans to eat. So that is one reason why people would collect and eat animals that live in tide pools, is because they're really easy to get to. It's interesting, some of those animals like mussels that might be along the shoreline, pretty easy to collect. Although people do eat them, there's plenty of mussels out there, so it's not like the mussels are disappearing. But sea otters also like to eat mussels. And so in some areas, people and sea otters are competing for the same thing. The sea otters have to eat a lot. And they don't have choices like, hey, let's go out for a cheeseburger tonight. The sea otter has to collect its own food from the ocean, right? So the sea otter is going to eat a huge number of mussels and crabs and urchins and abalone from right along that shoreline. And for in some areas, people don't like that because the urchins or the otters are eating a lot of the food that they want to eat, that the humans want to eat. But we do have to find that balance with those other animals. So in some cases, collecting animals out of tide pools, probably just because it's easy. People do like the taste of them. Many of them are related. So crabs, the last animal that we haven't looked at quite yet, are often eaten by people, right? Crabs, lobsters, shrimp, super tasty, and people love to eat them. So some of the varieties of crab that you might find in a tide pool could be edible, although they're often really small. People could eat them. Maybe you could find some shrimp in a tide pool also. In some areas in the tropics, you might even find little spiny lobsters. That would be even bigger, could be in a tide pool. Fantastic. So some of those meals are tasty. And then you think about octopus, snails, clams, mussels, chitons. Those are all mollusks, very muscular animals, really good to eat because of their food value. So there's another great reason, is some of these animals just have a lot of food value for what is basically just reaching down and picking them up. That's pretty handy to get a good meal. All right, let's finish up with our crab here. And I've got a couple different crabs to show you. This first one, I actually cannot remember the species of crab that this is, and it's, of course, hiding underneath the pipe now. Can't really see its whole body, but it's sort of a typical crab. It's got 8 legs for walking and 2 modified into claws up front. Then if we look out here in the middle, we have a hermit crab. And the big difference there is the hermit crab on the back end of its body does not have its own shell to protect it, its own exoskeleton. And so it has this old snail shell for protection. And that empty snail shell provides basically a mobile home for that hermit crab. Now here in our touch pool, you can see the hermit crab is like, you're touching me, whatever. If we were out in the wild and this were a wild hermit crab that had never been touched by a human, it probably would have pulled its whole body inside the shell as soon as my shadow got near it, because they can use that to protect themselves quite effectively. And that shell goes wherever they want. So the hermit crab can really exist wherever it would like to be. They move faster than pretty much all of these other creatures that we've seen today, maybe not the octopus. But they can crawl to new areas. They can be underwater. They can protect themselves from predators in the low tide zone by just pulling themselves into that snail shell. They can climb up out of the water because they can just walk back down into the water if they need to. So the hermit crab can really live wherever it would like. When I put it into my intertidal zones, though, I want to give that little crab a little protection, because the animal that would love to eat it would be the octopus. So I like to put my hermit crab out there in the middle tide zone. All right, and before we wrap up, I see there's some questions here. A kelp crab, that is a type of crab. I don't think that's the one that I showed you. They're similar, but we do have kelp crabs here. Mr. Crabs, I would call him a pot-bellied crab, actually. Tough call. All right, and let's see. A couple of questions. How did sea cucumbers get their name? The one that I showed you doesn't really look like a cucumber at all, but a lot of tropical sea cucumbers have a kind of green, warty appearance. So they really do look like the cucumber, the vegetable. They're sort of dark, green, or even blackish. But the one that we have is called a California sea cucumber. It has a little bit different color and shape to its body, so it doesn't actually look like a cucumber, but they got their names basically from those ones in the tropics that look like just little fat cucumbers. My favorite tide pool animal? For sure the octopus. Here in Alaska, you would only find little tiny ones in the tide pools because our octopuses get to be so big. The adults wouldn't be found in the intertidal zones typically, although in areas of Alaska that have a little bit more extreme tides than we do here in our town, the difference in their tides might be closer to like 8 meters from high to low tide, 8 or 9 meters. At the lowest tides, big octopuses can be exposed because their den is like a big rock and there's a little cave underneath it, and the water might go out below that level. They're fine under there for an hour or two probably, staying wet and staying out of sight, because they're totally hidden. So you can actually go around at low tide, not necessarily in a tide pool where there's water in a little pool, but underneath the rocks at low tide, you can sometimes see pretty big octopuses out there. And the octopus, they're my favorite just because they've got so many different things that they can do, so many abilities. I think they're awesome. Do our animals have names? Not most of these, but the octopuses do have names because each one is so different as an individual, and they really like to interact with people because they want to chase their prey. They're very active creatures, so they will actively grab us, taste us, feel us, and interact when we feed them. It's super important for us to have that interaction with the octopus so that they have something different. Every couple of days when they get fed, something new happens, and we give them little puzzles to work out. So each one of them just behaves differently enough that it's easy to keep them straight, and we give each one a name. They also live to be 5 or 6 years old, which is pretty long-lived for an invertebrate like that. Most octopuses would only live to be 1 or 2 years at the most, but here the giant Pacific octopus lives pretty long, so we get pretty attached to them. Let's see if we've got any other last questions. Oh, the plural of octopus is actually, if you're really into language, It's technically octopuses. And the reason why it would not be octopi is because of the root of the word. The word octopus comes from octopodes, which is a Greek word. And putting an I on the end would be a Latin ending, not a Greek ending. So with octopodes, the octopus gets that root from the Greek word. And so the correct plural, so you know if you're kind of geeky about language, the correct plural of octopus is octopuses. And you can spread that to as many people as you think care to know about language, which is not often that many. Let's see if we've got any other questions. Have any of our animals had any bad injuries? Absolutely. Things happen. And we try to make sure that our animals get along well with each other. But occasionally someone gets into a tussle in an aquarium, and we have accidents. So we have great veterinary staff here, and the animal care folks that look at these animals every day will notice that something is awry right away. They do their daily checks, and of course, all of these animals will eventually die somehow. So if they get sick or just really old, someone else may eat them in the tank. We try to avoid that, but ultimately, these animals can't live forever. None of them can. So we just try our best to make sure they stay healthy and have a fantastic habitat to live in. And these ones in the touch pool are doing great. Our little crab is exploring now, having a great time. It's really fun to see them out and about. And I'm very glad to have had the opportunity to share all of these animals with you. Thanks for joining me today. I can see Katie on screen here with a tide pool behind her. And it's probably time to wrap up, is it?
I think so. Thank you so much, Darin. That was really, really informative. The kids, I could just tell, were all over this topic. They are obsessed with jellyfish and anything in the ocean.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And hold your questions. I know we have more sessions coming up with Darin. I don't have a calendar with me right now, but I know Melly literally sent you another email like within the last 5 minutes. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks,
you are
Darin.
very welcome. And Katie and Melly, I'll send you an email just to talk about future sessions here. But we're looking forward to doing a lot more of these.
Awesome. Yeah, because we've definitely been confirmed that we're good to go for the summer camp. So we're really excited to
Oh, fantastic.
going. Okay,
Awesome.
thanks. Have a great day.
All righty.
Bye,
Well, thank you
everybody.
guys. Bye-bye.